Thank you, Nivas. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We're in almost the last session of this wonderful event called Against All Odds Startup Summit, India Edition by Freshworks. I've got a wonderful guest today. I'm very excited, Rahul. I'm personally excited to be talking to you. Given the background you've had, we'll get into it in just a little bit. But I've got Rahul Chari, the CTO and co-founder of PhonePe, and many other credentials in your sort of kitty. And I'm Vinod Chandramouli. I run Southeast Asia business for Freshworks. So Rahul, I want to start by a little bit of a history. And Mind360 was your first startup, which got acquired by Flipkart, and then you moved in, and then you saw this immense growth in Flipkart. Let's start by way of introduction, and obviously I want to start with the earliest. What was? Oops, I think we lost Rahul. But no, thank you, Rahul, for jumping back in. We were a little worried, but yeah. So my first question was around back in the day with Mind360.
Yeah.
Trying to build a digital media company in 2011 was already really hard, and then getting into Flipkart and then trying to convert that through your career through supply chain into where PhonePe is today must have been even more exciting. That's the whole crux of my topic with you today. Talk to us a little bit about how the startup ecosystem was back in the day from your perspective.
Thanks, Vinod. Thanks to Freshworks. It's very exciting to be here. It's always been some of the best events conducted by the ecosystem has been with Freshworks. So very happy to be here. So it was actually 2009. We started Mind360 back in 2009. That's almost more than 11 years prior to where we are today. And compared to where we are today, the ecosystem was non-existent. I mean, there wasn't a startup ecosystem. Obviously, there were some companies doing well. I know that Make My Trip went IPO around that time. One of the events that actually really excited us about where we could take our company one day. But overall, it was extremely lean and extremely difficult, right? There were multiple aspects to it. Hiring or having anybody join you on a mission was almost mission impossible. I remember having to actually talk to the parents of some of the engineers who continue to actually work with me today, convincing the parents about letting their son or daughter join us, and that we were legitimate, right? I mean, that's that's how it was. And I think investment obviously wasn't anywhere close to where it was today, but that wasn't the biggest problem. I think the larger problem was how seriously you were taken by traditional businesses, because ultimately at that point, today we actually have an ecosystem where we thrive off each other. I mean, we are actually very proud and happy clients of Freshworks, for example, right? But then at that point, as a startup, your business and partnerships came from a lot of traditional houses, and to be taken seriously enough as a young gun in that environment was very, very difficult. In fact, ultimately, one of the reasons that led us to the acquisition by Flipkart was this whole marriage of minds. I mean, we were so pleasantly surprised to see how Binny was thinking about Flipkart and e-commerce, how passionate he was, and how he had this whole mission to change the world. Mekin, who came and visited us, and it was really meeting of the minds more than anything else that led us to the acquisition.
Yeah, I mean, when I was read about it in 2011, I'd just gotten into a big media company, and it was very surprising. We were assuming it's going to be the next big Netflix. And there was a lot of rumor around the fact that the distribution of media is going to come in. But that changed now. Where you are today, you reinvented a whole new broadcast, of what I would say an industry, and you guys are the largest. So kudos to you. Thank you for all the right decisions you've taken so far to get PhonePe to where it is. But let's talk about PhonePe in current state right now. Right? I mean, we spoke about Meet 360 and what your move was in its current state with what this seems to be an unreal 6-7 months for a lot of us. Where is PhonePe's head at? Where are you at the moment? How are your sentiments compared to what was back in the day? Are you what do you think about the startup ecosystem right now?
I think I'll split it into two parts, right? One specific to PhonePe and one on the larger startup ecosystem. Specific to PhonePe, with all the gloom around, given the social conditions, the macroeconomic conditions, as well as very specifically to the startup ecosystem here in India, I think given the space we are in, we've actually been on the right side of things, right? Because obviously digital payments per se and digital commerce has effectively become the need of the hour. Even the fence sitters, if you may call them, who were probably still testing the waters when it came to digital payments or even digital commerce, have been forced into it. Right, it's been one of those cycles of trial by force versus trial by choice, and I think it's here to stay. This is a baseline shift when it comes to behavior, because irrespective of how soon we get to a vaccine and how soon things come back to normal, and hopefully they do very soon, I think there is a factor of convenience when it comes to being able to transact remotely, being able to transact digitally, that is here to stay. So I think we have been on the right side of things. And a lot of how we were set up over the last few years as a company has actually helped us in this particular period of uncertainty. We pride ourselves in being a startup that is actually a startup of startups. So within the company, we have the structure of what we call as pods, which are pretty much virtual companies where individuals by name from various teams are mapped to a charter or a goal. And that's what helps us be nimble, stay on our toes, actually compete with the next hungry startup around the corner, while continuing to retain the edge that we have as a fairly large player now. So because of that, the communication lines across various functions were already set. And the fact that the physical presence of folks in a room was taken away did not affect us to that great an extent. We were able to run with a lot of our roadmap across a lot of our charters fairly well. So I think it was, while it was designed for a very different reason, it was designed for ensuring that we continue to retain the agility and the decentralized decision-making that we believe is needed in a hyper-competitive and a hyper-growth space that we are in, but helped us through the COVID situation, right? When it comes to all the other startups, it's a tough time. There is no question, right? I think there are broadly, I would say, 3 buckets of startups that I believe one should actually introspect and classify themselves into. One is where your core business model is completely going to change because of the current situation, right? If it was about a service or about a product that has lower relevancy over the next 2 years because of the current situation, I think a hard pivot would be needed, and that requires deep thought, and in some cases just starting fresh or starting from scratch, especially if you're early stage, is a tough call, but maybe the right call. In other cases where your core business is not challenged as much, and you have the wherewithal to be able to actually see this through from specifically from a financial situation, with the help of your team and your investors and your board, I think there is an opportunity actually to look at how you can set yourself up for things when things do bounce back, right? And they will. I think always an optimist. I think the world always comes out stronger, and when it comes out stronger, there's going to be rapid growth again. So if you're able to see that through, you have to think of how you can actually set yourself up for greater success, specifically from a technology perspective. Been talking to a lot of startups. I think it's a golden opportunity to actually work on the whole tech debt, set yourself up for better scale, kind of address all the things that highly demanding business roadmap always prevented you
Right.
from investing in. And the third one really is, look, I think specifically in the B2C space, in the consumer internet space, all of us have always had ambitions to do pretty much everything, right? It's been, uh, if you do have a user base and you have a highly engaged user base, you could take anything to that user base. That's been the ambition that we've all gone ahead with. We've kind of actually always stayed away from that, right? We have believed in a lot of partnerships. We believed in kind of staying core to what our strengths are. I think it's important to actually go back and introspect on that. There are opportunities to strike partnerships, synergies, strategic engagements, or complementary product offerings with even somebody you may have thought to be a competition somewhere in the distant future, right? That distant future is so uncertain right now. It probably makes sense to kind of evaluate who you want to be working with over the next few years to see this through.
Yeah. I was talking to a buddy of mine. He heads product management, and he was telling me, "Do you know what it means not to have a customer come in and say there's no bug, and for product managers to put our head down and focus on it?" So I think to a lot of people, the grass is always green on the other side. But you brought up some very interesting points, especially around the scale, and factor in this downtime to go back and rethink the go-to-market strategy, rethink the product strategy. As a CTO of PhonePe, you obviously from your past and from what happened within Flipkart after Mind 360 got acquired all the way through. You must have seen exponential growth because you were at that point with Flipkart where everybody outsider saw exponential growth. From a technology perspective and also from that whole structural thinking perspective as a startup, what were some of your biggest learnings in that period where there was scale which was coming at unprecedentedly towards you guys and you had to manage all of that from a technology perspective?
Yeah, I think I always tell people it's probably the best degree that I've got and the best university I could have attended. Flipkart is just that. And it's for a lot of us, right? I mean, the Flipkart mafia now is flung far and wide, but we all actually owe it to Flipkart in terms of now famously thinking very big and also customer centricity. But very specifically, if you look at what my biggest learnings were outside of those, I do believe that thinking big is something that I've learned from Flipkart. I think it's about kind of engineering a lot of compressed learning cycles. If you look at the point in time we are as a country and a startup ecosystem, what US probably did over 2 decades and what China then achieved in probably 10 to 15 years, India is striving and has no other option but to try to strive for that in 5 years. So we are in a compressed cycle of growth and achievement. And to do that, you need to have a lot of mini compressed learning cycles. Big Billion Day is a classic example, right? The Big Billion Day sale, first one. It's famous and infamous for various reasons, but I believe that it served one great purpose. It actually gave us a deep insight and is one of the core reasons why we actually started PhonePe also. Deep insight into what you have to do to be able to achieve the kind of exponential scale that you need to do overnight, right? And that's a classic example of a compressed learning cycle, right? That one event. Today, a Big Billion Day with a significantly higher scale is conducted almost seamlessly, right? I remember on the opening of the sale on the first day, I think 8 a.m. we opened the gates, and by 8:10 we had all payment gateways in the country down, right? That's when the realization dawned about the fact that we keep talking about going digital from a commerce perspective, from various different businesses. The fact is that the infrastructure to be able to conduct a business online, which ultimately comes down to seamless money movement between a consumer and the merchant, B2B or B2C, doesn't matter, wasn't just there, right? So I think the compressed learning cycle is a huge one. Second one is while you actually are on this compressed learning cycle where you're in this whole continuous build, deploy, measure, learn, and rebuild, you also have to do continuous platformization. I think that's the important balancing factor. Otherwise, you go into growth hack hell, which is all about growth hacking and being scrappy, but never being sustainable. So I think one of the things, the culture of continuous platformization, which Amod, the CTO at Flipkart, made fairly famous, I think was a huge learning to be able to invest in your core platforms fairly deeply and fairly early on and in a continuous manner. And the third was the power of data, right? I mean, the supply chain and the kind of efficiencies we could extract by just looking at data very closely. This is not data science at all. It's not ML. It's definitely not AI, because I genuinely believe that those words are thrown around fairly loosely these days. It's just common sense and looking at your data, right? Which the amount of juice you can extract for the technology, for systems, and for the business is amazing. So I think those would be the key learnings.
Yes. You'll be very surprised as to how much data human AI can pull compared to an AI if we interpret it the right way. But one point where I want to anchor on is this. Now, somewhere I read, and it was quoted, that Netflix said that their biggest competitor is sleep. In your current role at PhonePe, I'm assuming the biggest competitor is cash, among other things as well, right? And how are you, like you mentioned, how are you going to put everything at the consumer and ensure that every SKU is coming back? What are you tracking and everything else? And working closely with the PhonePe team, I know how much importance it's given to ensure that you're not carpet bombing at the same time making these decisions. Where do you think it goes from here, from a scale perspective? After you built what you've done at Flipkart, after what you've done at My360, right here at PhonePe, from here on out, either taking into consideration what the impact of COVID has been or not, but irrespective, where do you think you're going to be going as a scale? What else could we be doing as a scale?
I think, to me, right now, my journey from My360 to Flipkart has all been in preparation for what I think we could achieve as a team at PhonePe, really. I mean, a lot of those learnings, both what to do, what not to do, have been applied here. And I think we've just scratched the surface. Our scale is significant, even today, in terms of the number of daily transactions, the number of transactions per second, or the total money movement that we actually enable. But the fact is, like you mentioned, it's just scratching the surface when it comes to what cash and the utilization of cash today in the market. We are still a 95% cash economy, and probably COVID will push it to 90%. But that still is a dent. From a scratch, it's gone to the dent. So I think we have a huge way to go when it comes to scale, right? I think China is a great example of the extent to which retail payments across the board have penetrated day-to-day life. And I believe that India will definitely get there, because I think it's going to be a huge positive impact on the economy as a whole, whether you take the tracking of funds, whether you take tax payments by merchants, etc. I think it has to happen. How soon it'll happen is anybody's guess, and I believe there will be some boost from COVID. But strategically, as PhonePe, what we are trying to do, I think we kind of ticked all the boxes when it comes to being a transaction platform that powers peer-to-peer money transfers and payments, right? The acceptance is significantly pervasive across the country, and we continue to actually invest in that. A lot of your digital use cases have been covered by PhonePe. But I think where we need to be with the consumer is, if there are today, if there are 10 typical purchases that a consumer does on a daily basis, we seem to be an option almost on all 10, right? We need to get to be the choice on all 10, right? That's the work that we need to do by building trust with the consumer. And I think that will happen only if we cover the rest of the money journey that any particular user has, a user being a regular consumer or a merchant. Everything from managing their money as well as making their money work for itself in terms of protection through insurance or investments through mutual funds, equity, or satisfying their needs for cash through lending. If we were to cover that spectrum of engagement of a consumer with their finances, I think we will become a choice on all the 10 acceptance points that they encounter on a daily basis. So they see it everywhere today, but not everybody uses it. To make everybody kind of use it, we need to ensure that we are also covering the broader spectrum of their engagement with their money. I think that's how I look at the next phase of our growth and focus.
That's wonderful. And I can't imagine, I mean, from a scale perspective, I obviously have a little bit of a purview on what you guys push traffic onto us, and that's immense. I'm assuming it only is exponentially bigger. But you said, and I've seen it as well, is you are a startup within a startup, and that's how you run it. How do you balance agility versus being compliant? How do you choose between what to build and what not to in terms of prioritization? Because I'm assuming every single bit of which your business wants to drive would take an immense amount of engineering effort. But agility, like you mentioned, is something which you guys are famous for. But how do you balance between that, either at your level or sort of the principle PhonePe has?
No, I think it's actually a great question, because I remember about a year and a half, especially after 6 months after demonetization, when everything was about going digital and everything was an idea that we had to chase. We realized that ultimately we're just chasing our tails, because it's very, very difficult to execute on every idea that comes your way, however exciting it looks. And we kind of also had some of those learnings from Flipkart, when there was a phase where we were taking a lot of knee-jerk reactions in terms of competition or market opportunities. Decided to actually stay away from that. And we actually have a fairly well-structured process to what we chase as an opportunity, right? So we actually say ideas are dime a dozen. Ideas are welcome, but we actually put it into the ideas bin and don't go into execution phase until we've answered a few key questions. One is, does the idea align with the overall strategy? Like I've spoken about, we stand as a transaction platform foundationally on payments, now looking to actually also broaden our spectrum with financial services. Whatever we chase has to lie in some spectrum of this, right? Just because I have a user base, I shouldn't be going and trying to build a grocery business online, right? That's so we have a fairly clear thing about it being aligned to our strategy. Then the opportunity has to be fairly large. Well, I mean, the size of the opportunity, and it should be applicable to a very large part of our base. One of the things that we pride ourselves in as a product is that we are fairly utilitarian. We serve the needs of the metros, the Bangalore crowd, the Bombay crowd, as well as the Nagpur crowd, the Raipur crowd, right? So we actually believe that we are functional and utilitarian. That's what we stand for as a platform that is enabling the country to go digital with their money. So the applicability of what we have to do has to be broad-based, right? That's the second one. The third one is, what is the opportunity that we have either from a data differentiation or a technology differentiation? What is the IP that we can create through technology and data in what we chase? I think that works as a great filter, right? Because if you don't have that, technology at the rate at which it's getting commoditized, whatever you build is going to have a shelf life of probably a few months. So we try to see that what we are investing in has a shelf life of a few years at least, because I think beyond that, you have to be in seriously cutting edge research today, because commodity technology is commoditized, right? And the final one is the go-to-market strategy. Given our distribution base, does what we chase take an advantage of all the time, effort, and money that we have spent in building out this base? And is it going to ride on top of that, or are you going to have to make new investments when it comes to the go-to-market and the distribution? I think when we apply that lens, right, and it's fairly easy, it's not motherhood statements, these are tough questions to answer. It actually whittles down to things that actually make sense for the company to invest in with technology at the center of it. So that's broadly our prioritization framework. Outside of that, how do we manage the agility part of it? I have this blog out there that I'm fairly proud about. We have a clear map in the company, not just in the technology team, of what are core systems and what we believe are peripheral systems. And the name shouldn't throw anybody off. Peripheral systems are no less important than core systems. But the impact of peripheral systems when things may go wrong are siloed to a vertical business line or a smaller set of consumers. The impact of what when things go wrong on core systems is extremely broad based, right? So whether it's our core payment orchestrator, whether it's our accounting system, whether it's our risk and fraud detection platform, these are examples of our core platforms where we don't growth hack. We, in fact, if there's a new request, if product come or business comes back with something that requires a new capability to be built on our core systems, we actually say that we can't deliver it in this quarter. So the roadmap for the quarter on core systems is locked and it's pristine. So the expectation is that if you need a change on the core systems, come back the next quarter and we will prioritize it. If it's on the peripheral systems, we do entertain growth hacking and changes in the roadmap. I think this also has a great side effect. It actually forces teams to think much deeper about how to actually maximize on what they already have as capabilities and features, rather than move on to the any object, right? So it's a great forcing function.
Thank you. And I think with Nivas coming in, that's the cue for us to wrap it up. I've got one final question.
Sure.
In an interview with Your Story, you said, and I quote, "Hustle is overrated when it comes to technology.
Yeah.
Don't try taking the shortest path. Think at least 2 years ahead and anchor yourself to something to build continuously." And that resonates really well with what you're saying now. But if you were to have built Mind 360 post-COVID now, in less than 30 seconds, tell us what would that 2-year plan be for you?
If I was to build Mind 360 right now, I would actually build a platform that I would want to compete with the Netflix and the Amazon Primes of the world off the bat. And I wouldn't mind spending a year and a half to go to market versus trying to actually release it in 2 weeks.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you, Nivas.
Bye, guys.